Good morning, everybody. I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Yoder, who's our guest today. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff she's working on, and then we're going to jump into the lecture for today. So, I'll leave you
quickly. I'm gonna. I have two study abroad opportunities up on the board that the. I forgot to bring my flyers. That the Comm Department offers. Comm Department offers several study abroad opportunities, but these are the upcoming ones. Food Fight in Barcelona, Spain, January 3 through 16. If you're interested, it's a food studies identity course. And if you would be interested in that, application is closed, but if that's something you're interested in, contact me and we can have a conversation about that. Narratives of New China is going to be this summer, June 22nd through July 5th. It's a digital studies, visual studies, narrative course, and also a food studies course in which we look at how China presents itself to the world. Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. I'm giving you sort of the down and dirty explanation of this particular course. It's a 2-week course. We go to those 3 cities, and what we're looking at is historical Chinese presentation and current presentation through a communication lens, specifically using rhetoric, right, and narrative analysis. And we look at traditional food, and we look at the modernization of Chinese food, and you look at how food and particular sites are used to represent a national identity. Similar to how Washington, D.C. is used to represent the national identity of U.S. Americans. And also how we use food every day, and our food choices and our food ways to represent ourselves and our culture. So we're bringing those 2 particular items together in this particular course, all right? I put my contact info here, so if you have any interest in either of these courses, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to have a much longer conversation with you about them, and also send you the flyers that have information on them as well. Okay? All right.
There's a wonderful show that you're probably familiar with called Flavorful Origins.
I watch it a lot.
And the new season just came out, and it's all about food in China.
Yeah.
This season's about Hunan.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, I was watching the other one. Yeah. There's also, maybe the Chinese students know about this, there's a young woman that I watch, she's on YouTube. Is her name Ziqi? Ziqi? Yeah, she's pretty fascinating, right? There's not a lot of dialogue in it, but she lives on her grandma's farm, and it's pretty interesting. Have you seen it? No? It's pretty interesting. You should check her out. She's on YouTube, and she's a big sensation in China, and there's also some critical analysis of her. It's actually quite interesting. So. And her food is beautiful. Pardon me?
And she's strong.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Well, yes, she does everything. She builds furniture, she grows her own food, she makes these dishes. Okay, so we're here today. May I just launch in?
Yes, please. I'm just going to figure out why.
We're here today to talk about diversity, and which is a huge topic. And so I usually spend a semester, I teach common diversity, and I usually spend a semester talking about diversity. So we're not going to be able to, of course, to pack it all into one day. But we're specifically, this is for you to be conscious about diversity, diverse ideas, diverse concepts in your writing. All right, you're in this class to learn how to do a particular type of writing. And what we want to make sure is that you're paying attention to those particular ideas and concepts when you are confronted with a piece that you need to write that might need that sort of attention. So when I teach common diversity, throughout the semester we address race, gender, sexuality, ability, age, power, and that's a lot to cover, but we take them sort of singularly, which is a little difficult to do because all of those things cross over with one another on a daily basis, all right? It's also an interesting course for me to teach because I'm a white woman with a lot of privilege, all right? And so I'm in my perception of myself is I'm not that diverse, all right? But I do have the luxury of teaching on a campus that is incredibly diverse in a classroom just like this, all right? And also diversity, oftentimes, we say diversity and students go, oh my God, God. And we try and make it applicable to your lives. So we tend to come from that perspective. We want to have conversations as to what your experiences are from your position as to whatever diversity you have. What is your uniqueness and how does that get managed in the world? And also what have been your past experiences? And I suggest that that's what you draw from when Lisa is asking you to write a piece and be conscious about diversity, all right? Because we can take all these particular pieces, our age, our ability, our gender, and I like to think of them as actually cultural identities from which we speak from. So there are moments in which I speak from my gender. Not all day long. I don't spend the whole day chatting from my space of being a woman if I self-identify as a woman, right? And the truth is, we don't always necessarily know how people self-identify in today's world, all right? And then I don't spend all day speaking from the space of being able-bodied, all right? And as I age, my able-bodiedness takes on a new light, all right? And I don't spend all day speaking from my whiteness, all right? And then that's actually my favorite chapter to teach in common diversity is race. Because if you think about it, how silly is race? A color, right? It's just, I mean, I'm sort of pink, right? We're using color to identify ourselves, and it has tremendous power in our society, U.S. American society, tremendous power, right? And we can't, it's a biological foundation we can't count on, right? We can't count on it, you know? You know, I would say that you are, what is your name? Remind me. Matt. I would say that Matt is chocolate brown, right? Being creative, right? But that's not all that Matt is, right? And that's my choice of words. That may not be Matt's choice of words. And does it even matter, right? So race is one of those diverse perspectives that we kind of unpack in communication. We spent a long time talking about it. So you can see where this stuff is like a little bit complicated. And currently, I'm lucky enough to live in 3 places in the United States. I move around between these places, and that has taught me more in the last year than when I just lived here in Denver, about diversity, tolerance, etc. All right, I come from Denver, and I get to come here once a month, and this is my home. All right, my husband has a job, and we live in Bowling Green, Kentucky, the red, lovely state of Bowling Green, Kentucky, all right? And then I spent a lot of time in South Jersey. Bowling Green, Kentucky and South Jersey are very, very, very different than the progressive bubble that I live in here in Denver. Denver's very progressive, right? Very diverse, very progressive. Now, but then when I come to Denver, I go downtown and I run into a lot of young people that have moved to Denver, and they're all very white. Right? But I spend my time over here across the street on Spear, and I live in all this diversity. So what I'm trying to show you is that within the progressive bubble of Denver, there's then the progressive academic bubble inside of it called this CU Denver. All right? And so we want to take into consideration that I have to take into consideration that I am lucky enough to be in that small bubble and experience diversity every single day. That's not necessarily true across the street, across Spear Avenue in downtown Denver. All right? So we have these pockets of diversity that we then need to sort of negotiate. All right? So I want you to think about what we talk about today as we talk about experiences with diversity. Maybe it's gender, maybe it's race. I want you to think about your experiences, all right? And I mean, what I'm able to do in a semester-long course is we have these long discussions about people's experiences. And I want you to think about what has been your experience, right? And when you speak from your space of gender, what has been your experience? What has been your experience when you speak from the space of race? But first, I want to chat with the Chinese students. Is this okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep up by changing the slides.
I know. You're sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Doing the best I can.
That's all right. You're sweet. I appreciate it. So I would like to first address the Chinese students, all right? Are all of you ICB? Everyone nod your head, yeah, you're ICD? Are you, and you are not ICD, no. Are you Denver, local?
No,
No? Where are you from?
I'm from China.
Where in China?
The northeast part.
Great, awesome, that's even more helpful. So not Beijing, all right? Are all of you, you're all from ICB, but are you all from Beijing? Anybody not, anybody not from Beijing? You're my, yeah, I'm sorry, you're it, you're it. So, no, but, so I would like, and I know this might be a hard question, but what does diversity look like in China? Where do you see is it gender? Is it ability and disability? Is it race? Where do you see, is it ethnicity? Where do you see diversity in China? I fully expected initial silence. I know how y'all work. You wanna try, you wanna tackle that for me?
Yeah, sure. What's your question?
Where do you see diversity in China?
Diversity?
Yeah.
I think maybe the lifestyle. So some lifestyle in Beijing is like pretty fast. So in my city, I mean, people looking for a nicer job in Beijing. I don't know what else.
Okay, so if we look at diversity from the spectrum of gender, age, which for maybe a better way to say that is generations, all right? We look at gender, age, ability, disability, all right? Which these are like sort of black and white parameters here. So race, all right? What are how many races are there in China?
56.
56. Are those races or ethnicities?
We call them nationalities.
Great, even better, okay? Are there 56 nationalities?
This 56 ethnicity.
56 ethnicities. Okay, great. So what's the difference between, and you guys are, hang with me, okay? What's the difference between an ethnicity and a nationality?
The clothes are different, and each ethnicity may have their traditional food, traditional clothes, and traditional maybe holidays. Maybe some of the ethnicities may not have some traditional holiday, but some should get rest of this day and they didn't go to work and or eat some specific food to celebrate the holiday.
How about language? Is there a different language?
Yeah, like, because my ethnicity don't have nothing special.
What's your ethnicity?
I don't know how to speak in English, but in Chinese, it's like,
You're
like,
Han Chinese.
yeah,
You're the dominant group.
yeah.
Okay. So why do you say you don't have anything special?
Because I see some other ethnicities, for example, like from people from Xinjiang province, just they may get like, I'm not that familiar with, so I can't say it correctly maybe, but in some holiday they may just get together, like eating food together, dancing, and maybe some like Inner Mongolia people. Like people from here most of people from Inner Mongolia may just get ethnicity called Mongolzu, like they may ride horse like at a specific day or get together. Because one of my friends from Tibet, their family at the New Year's Eve, like we just don't have some norms of the cultural celebration, but they may just go to the church or people getting together as a family to like pray for something like their
So different customs.
yeah.
Okay, different customs. Now that's a perfect example of what Lisa's trying to get you to do. So let's say you have to write a story about those individuals in that province. What do you think you need to pay attention to?
I felt like we should respect.
Good job.
Yeah, because Because at first I would just like joke, because I'm not in the means of like saying something, but maybe just not that respectful to another. And that girl told me, and I know that, and I agree with her. So I just agree and I respect about their norms and what words that we can say in the area of their nationalities place.
Okay.
So I didn't say it.
Okay, fair enough. Good, great. Gentleman behind you, what's your name?
Dominic.
Dominic. What's the difference between ethnicity and nationality for you?
I would say that like it would come from traditions. Certain traditions could.
So what's your ethnicity?
I'm white.
That's a race. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. All right. Whole family's Italian?
Yeah.
So then what's your nationality? Where do you hold a passport?
Do I have a passport?
Uh-huh.
No, I do not.
Do you have a driver's license?
I do.
Where is that from?
Here. I'm American.
Okay, so yeah, your nationality would be US American,
Right.
right? Everybody's nationalities, and that's important to understand. Nationalities are tied to where you have legal documents, all right? So, and where you have your allegiance to. So, for wherever, so what is your nationality?
Me?
Yeah.
Mexican American.
Okay, yeah, that's probably more your ethnicity. Where do you have a passport? Where? Yeah, so you would be US American. Where we hold citizenship. Okay, your nationality is where you hold citizenship. Your ethnicity, all right, is tied to your origins, languages, cultural traits, all right, traditions. That's your ethnicity. And sometimes that's hard for US Americans, all right, because we get really lost in just being American. All right, and that is even challenged as well. Canada and Mexico would like to challenge you on your American because they are American as well. All right, so that's why we try to say U.S. American because you hold citizenship in the U.S. part of America. All right, because we've got South America and North America. All right, and so, but your ethnicity is kind of the interesting stuff. Right, your ethnicity is that stuff that you kind of come with from where your grandma's from and where your grandpa's from, but a lot of people came to the United States to get rid of that, right? To get away from being Italian, possibly, all right? Or they came to embrace it even more, yet also be U.S. citizens, right? So ethnicity is the kind of cool stuff about us, all right? The other thing when we're looking at diversity, all right, you know, gender is kind of the cool stuff about us because those are it's socially constructed, right? When I say, actually to be honest with you, all of these are socially constructed, but that means how have you come to be who you are? So when we're looking at diversity, you want to understand how did you come to express being, I'm going to guess you self-identify as male, yes? Okay, how did you learn to be male?
It's like a walk, and my friends taught me how to be.
Right, and then you go to college and you learn different things, right?
Like sports, like that.
Right, exactly. You learn the language you're supposed to use, right? We're put in you know, I don't know if it was your mother or your grandmother maybe said to you, you know, that's not how a young man acts, all right? Or that's not how a young woman acts, right? That kind of stuff, which might make you crazy, all right? But that's how we learn this stuff, right? And so when you get to college, you get to unpack it all and then decide what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep, because sometimes you don't really fit into those categories. So oftentimes the cool stuff about looking at diversity is we talk about people who are on the margins. The people who don't fit neatly into, all right, those particular categories that society has developed for us when it comes to age and ability. For example, in the early 19th century, if you lost a hand, in any way that you may have lost a hand, you couldn't work any longer, right? Because we were defined by work was your physical body, using your physical body and working in that particular manner. If you couldn't use your physical body anymore, you couldn't make a living. So you were devalued as a person, all right? Well now, today, we have all sorts of things that people can do and have a disability, all right? Whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. right? Because we don't work in the same way any longer. Our value is not based on what I can do with my body. It's not how much weight I can lift, it's what I can do with my computer, what I can do with my mind, all right? Women's roles have changed, men's roles have changed, gender has changed, all right, and all those responsibilities, right? So when we're thinking about diversity in our lives, we also you want to constantly look at where did we come from? What is the socio-historical perspective of age, right? People are retiring later. China has a mandatory retirement age. Can you tell me, do you know the mandatory retirement age?
I think about 65.
It's 55. 55 for women, all right? I actually think it's 52 for women and 55 for men, right? And have they changed it?
I think it's 55 for women.
Okay, and it's mandatory. You don't get a choice. You have, and it's the idea is letting the younger generation come up and have jobs and be employed, right? And pay into the system. Okay? Well, here in the United States, the perception of age and the construction of age has changed drastically. All right? Now, we monitor you a lot when you're young. We have all sorts of ideas and legalities around age until you hit 18 and then 21. Right? After that, we don't pay attention to it as much as a society. All right? But we do have these ideas and social constructions about what you're supposed to do when you're 40. Right? And when you're 40, you're supposed to have a good career, all right? You're supposed to have a home and maybe a family, depending on how you're living your life, all right? Well, you throw on top of that a gay couple. Maybe they don't have great careers. Maybe they have fabulous careers. Maybe they don't have a home. Maybe they have a huge home, all right? Maybe they don't have children, all right? Because having children for a gay couple is a real struggle. Right, so we start seeing how all of these intertwine and overlap with one another. And you need to be, you can't be a good writer about this and pay attention to it until you've done your own self-analysis. Because we all have our biases. We all have them. Poor Lisa, I'm jumping all over the place here for her. We all have our biases, and you need to be honest with yourself. And you got them by your experiences in life. And I always like to think, we're all doing the best we can do, all right? We have experiences in life that might give us a negative perspective on a particular cultural group or a particular group of individuals or a person that has a representation of a particular cultural group. So then we generalize to everybody in that particular group. So when Lisa's asking you to pay attention to this in your writing, pay attention to yourself first. What are your biases, right? Where do you have prejudice? And why do you have it? All right? And I am probably the first person in the whole, I don't know if I'm one of those faculty members that goes, we all stereotype, we do it. No, it's not great, but we do it. All right? And I'm not going to sit here and just tell you you shouldn't stereotype, you do it. But you know what's beautiful about stereotypes? They get you to realize where your biases are. Right? And the problem with stereotypes is you don't want to stick with it, right? You want to use stereotypes as a learning, right? I have all sorts of things. Like I said, live in Kentucky right now. People in Kentucky drive incredibly slow. Very slow, right? It's very rural, because we also have rural and urban biases, right? We have rural and urban stereotypes.
That's what Yoder was talking about. I think Ray was talking about that earlier.
Right?
Difference between
So
Beijing
you're
and
right.
everything from-
Right, so you're right, exactly. So, and thank you for pointing that out, that's great. So we have these rural and urban biases as well. Well, I currently live in Kentucky. I would like to be slowly ripping my fingernails out rather than to drive behind anybody in Kentucky. Makes me insane. It's really good that none of you are in my car with me, because the things that I am saying are not very nice. All right, they're not, I'm like frickin' rednecks, I'm all over the board, right? There are rednecks everywhere in the world. There's a moment, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I'm probably a redneck, all right? But I have my biases. And now, because I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky, of course, I think everyone in Kentucky is a bad driver. Everyone, right? And I'm not giving anybody a break. Do you guys know what a redneck is? Think. Do you guys know what a redneck is? No? Who wants to explain to them a redneck? Come on, you can do it. This is what we do in diversity. We bring up those great phrases. What's a redneck? You want to do it? No? Well, okay, so this is perfect for diversity. Why don't you want to?
Because, I don't know, my grandparents were.
Ah, so you have some ownership here. All right. Okay, who wants to explain a redneck? Do you know what a redneck is?
I can try. Stereotype, thick southern accent, not very educated, talks funny, very blue collar, yeah, wears like overalls, big cowboy hats, I don't know, like likes NASCAR. It's like, yeah.
Wow, you were rolling. You're good.
I don't mean any of that.
Okay, so redneck is a term that we often use. He's not wrong, all right? Because there are rednecks in every state in the United States. Some people self-identify proudly, right? Some people are slightly embarrassed. It's okay, all right? This is what diversity is about. It's messy, it's gooey. All right, but rednecks are usually rural, live in a rural area or a smaller town, right? They're identified as people living in a rural or smaller town. And we have a perception, the stereotype, remember these are stereotypes, the stereotype of a redneck is, he can't, some of it, maybe not as educated as others, I don't know, but appreciates guns, appreciates rural life, and leads a rural, we tend to assume that they do not have as much education as others, all right? He added a particular way of speaking. You have them here in Colorado. We have a rural population here in Colorado that some might self-identify as a redneck and some might be stereotyped as a redneck, all right? But they tend to not be urbanites. Does that make sense?
And the phrase comes from the fact that that as a general rule, people who are in this classification work often outside on the farm, and so would get sunburned on the back of their neck. And when white people get sunburned, it turns red. Hence the name redneck.
Redneck, right? Because they did manual labor, right? They don't have, what's the word I want? They don't have white collar jobs, right? They don't, he mentioned blue collar. Blue collar, when you have a blue collar job, it means that you work with your hands. You use your body, all right? Which is what I was talking about earlier, right? Does that help? NASCAR, I'm not gonna even go into that. That's for another day, all right? Blue, and some of the things that need to count. Okay, where are we at this time?
11:31.
Excellent. All right, does anybody have any questions or comments? Because I think your response, what is your name? Taylor. Taylor, I know you, Taylor. I know I knew you. See, this is what happens when you teach online.
Yeah.
Like, she looks so familiar to me. Yeah, I apologize. This is the virtual between the real reality here. So Taylor, your response, your reaction was kind of brilliant. So were you embarrassed because of your grandparents or because you didn't want to say something bad about something?
I don't like saying anything bad about people.
All right. So, and unfortunately, diversity and our perspectives about the other, all right, because that's what we're doing is we're othering, all right, until we've sort of embraced this idea of difference. What we're really talking about is difference, and I'm going to tell you, because of the various places I've been lucky to go and travel internationally, and now in the United States, the places that I wander to, Denver is really much more tolerant space, all right? And so you're very lucky to be here, all right? Not that we don't have our prejudices, and not that we don't have discrimination, but we are much more about embracing difference, interested in difference, than going, whoa, all right? And so that's a really wonderful space to be in, because you learn a lot when you start embracing difference. You learn a lot, but we have all kinds of differences that we have to pay attention to. All right, when I do travel study, I'm just gonna be honest, white middle-class women travel abroad. All right, if I get one guy on my program, I am lucky. So that just took that program to a level of gender. a level of gender difference. Sorry, Lisa. A level, this is what we got to do with gender, right? And now, of course, in the United States, we throw in transgender, right? And everybody gets real confused about that, too. Last night in class, I have an individual, I had food as a communication class last night, and I have an individual in the class and I did not use the right pronouns. And she called me out. See, I didn't use the right pronoun there either. And so it's a learning process, you know, and I appreciate it being called out, and that's me, right? I live in academia. I'm open to that. Not everybody's going to be open to that. Right? So when Lisa is asking you to pay attention to your writing and pay attention to your representation of diversity, it's messy and it's complex, but it's really, I personally think it's super interesting to engage in it, right? And do these, you know, pay attention to how do people identify, how do they want to be identified, the power of identifying somebody else in a particular way. When you are writing for something that's going to be published, you have tremendous amount of power in your hands, and you need to be careful. All right, and what are you going to do with that power? All right, the media knows this, right? You know, we've got the conservative media and the liberal media. We really have lots of other media in between, all right? But the power of that kind of writing, what is it you want to get across? What is it you want people to know in your writing? And be really, really careful how you do that. Because you have the ability to just sway opinion. And that's why we engage in the media, right? That's why we engage in media, and that's why we participate in media. Because it's really, really powerful. It's an influencer. And you, in your writing, can influence. So you want to think about what is it you want to do with that. You want to be careful. Shall we do some exercises? Yeah. You need to jump in here.
I will. Okay, wait, necessary. You're doing great.
And by the way, I don't often look like this. I went to battle with a cat last night. He clearly won. Cute little guy, but he won.
So I want to talk a little bit about what we are going to do today. Okay, I'm going to break you up into groups, and for those of you who will be doing this online, you will do this by each individually, because putting you into groups is more trouble than it's worth for all of us. And you're going to have an opportunity to look at a couple of pieces of media, and then you're going to produce one. Either a press release, or an editorial, or a news story. It'll be up to your group to decide. And when we're writing, we need to think about these stories. Somebody posted this on Facebook the other day, and I grabbed it because it was exactly what we needed to think about for this class. When we live in a place that's as diverse as Denver, or the United States, or the world, there's usually a prevailing view. In America, for many, many generations, it has been the view of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. Okay, that's the power structure in this country. And that's the assumed audience, or has been until fairly recently. And as that changes, we as people who are interested in the media in any way have to be aware of that. That is not the only presumed audience anymore. First women, a little bit, became part of that audience. Then people of color started being a little bit more represented. Now we have people with different gender identities, different sexual identities, different religions, different ethnicities, nationalities, from where their families came from. Every group that has come to this country, and this is a gross generalization, but most people have come to America for some kind of freedom that they didn't have wherever they came from. My family came here because wherever Jews live, eventually we have to leave. because for some reason, everybody wants us out. So my family moved to America in the early 1900s. We were lucky enough to be here long before the Second World War. So a lot of my immediate family didn't have to go through that. We were already here. But when we first moved here, there were lots of places we weren't allowed to go. Lots of country clubs, lots of jobs that said, no Jews, no dogs, no Irish. That was a lot, there was literally signs on the doors that said things, and the idea that somebody who was not white would even try to walk in was so absurd that they didn't even get up, they didn't even make it to the sign. They were so not part of the discussion that it didn't occur to anybody to say no blacks, because it would never have occurred to them to think they could come in. So, I'm going to digress for just a minute to tell a little story that shows how things have changed. My cousin is a big shot attorney in New York. And when he graduated from the Colorado School of Law, which is one of the best law schools in the country, he was approached by a lot of law firms. And he was approached in particular by what we call a white shoe law firm, meaning that it was very fancy, like Jackie Onassis was a client of theirs, and that kind of big white money. And he said he took the interview simply because he wanted to tell them why he wouldn't work for them. And he said, I would never work for your law firm, because 50 years ago, when my Nana was looking for a job as a secretary, you refused to hire her because she was Jewish. And now, I don't care how much you want to pay me, I would never work for this firm. And that story stuck with me because it shows how in the space of just 2 generations, things have changed, and things we can hope will continue to change.
Yeah, we hope so.
And that people who are marginalized today will be able to tell that story when, that their grandchildren or sooner will be able to tell stories that say, well, I'm not coming because you didn't want me then. And that now that things have changed, there are consequences for that. So I'm going to give you a couple of links. I'm going to put them I'm going to put them up here, but not in here. I can't figure out how to make live links in a presentation, so I have them on a piece of, I'm going to stick them in Canvas actually right now so that you can access them easily without having to retype everything. There are a couple of stories that we're going to look at that will give you an idea what it looks like to have diversity in the way that you present things, and the stories that are out there that require us to think more consciously than we might. There are 4 different subjects. You don't have to read them all. I recommend that you and your group look each of them over a little bit. Some of them are longer than others. So we've got Bowling Green, Kentucky, avoiding, what's a fairness ordinance?
Essentially preventing discrimination, making it illegal to discriminate based on all the things that we have forever.
And so they don't want to do that in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
They have been fighting it. Now that article is from 2016.
Well, hopefully things have changed. Just last week, there were people dressed up as Orthodox Jews on the Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, handing out anti-Semitic literature that said stuff like, we did 9/11 and there was no such thing as the Holocaust and other absurdities. Black teenagers kill themselves more often than any other type of teenagers, and teenagers kill themselves more often than any other age group. And
so that's actually, if you think about that, that's combining race and age. All right, and in particular, in that particular space, all right? I'm gonna look at that.
And the difference between urban and rural very often comes down to healthcare. In an urban area, there are more hospitals, there are more doctors, there are more people to take care of you if something happens. I'm assuming that that's what this article is about.
Yeah, and that gets back to what, I don't remember, what is his name?
Yoder.
Yeah, what gets back to what I think you were talking about within China, is this idea that we have a construction of what somebody is like that lives in rural parts of our wherever, and we have a construction of what we think people are like when they live in an urban area, all right? And they're clearly different, right? Difference, that's what we're looking at here, they're clearly different. But we do tend, in the United States, to value the healthcare of urbanites more than we value the healthcare of our rural populations. And you can see this with the number of hospitals that have been closing over the last 5 years in rural America.
So that's what this article is about. And just so happens I read the New York Times Magazine section, and I was catching up, and I found this fascinating article, 3 African-American artists talking about the way that African-American art in general, and particularly that of women, had been closed out of museum spaces in the past and how that's changing. All 3 of these women have had their work shown in major institutions that 50 years ago would not have thought about showing the work of Black Americans. And so it's a really interesting conversation among these 3 women about how changes in the world have affected their art or not. So these are the articles that I'm going to ask you to look at.
That particular last one is not live because
Yeah, I know.
I'm missing an image.
I will, oh, there you go. But they will be live when I put them in Canvas in a few minutes while you guys get yourselves organized. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. If I count you off by 6, 12. If I count you off by 6, we'll have more or less even groups of 3.
All right.
So,
Why don't you would
will you do that?
No,
That would be
yeah.
perfect.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
You know, it's like kindergarten and count.
All right, go ahead.
1, 2, 4, 6, 1, 2,
5.
6.
Great, awesome.
Okay, so if you guys get yourselves in groups, all the 1s, all the 2s, all the 3s,
You
etc.
just want me to tell you where to go? Make it
Yes,
easier.
could you do
Yeah,
that?
1's over here, let's get 2's back there, let's 3's over here, 4's here, 5's, 6. And you know, make sure you introduce yourself to each other. I mean, we're probably done So I need to see you.
Sorry, you're like, and I just keep.
Yeah, okay.
Should we, are we okay up here?
No, but I don't need it.
But I just need to give it to her.
Oh, M4. Yeah. Here, right? I saw it.
Here is where?
I saw it.
I just have an
I know. Yeah, I'm sure you have your budget too. Yes. Okay. You uploaded it to Studio Drive? You uploaded a copy of it? You are like those students.
And I'm like,
She's on top of everything.
Do we have anything we need to talk about any of the classwork? All right, awesome. Since you got me here, that's the reason I say that. And we could do that after class.
yeah.
About that, we'll do it after class.
Okay, so,
This 2 of you?
yeah, we have 1 group of 2.
That's awesome. I have to, are you gonna be able to tie it for us?
Okay. So, you can all access these now, because I have just uploaded them to Canvas. So I'm gonna turn this off, because you don't need them up here anymore.
Yeah, so go ahead and peruse them. Do you want them to just make a topic?
So, let's see.
It's a model.
So take a few minutes to look over these stories, okay? And then I'm going to ask you to choose how you would like to cover one of these events, okay? So there are several, everything that you're reading is about something that happened, okay? And they're either news or feature stories. So what I want you to do is put yourselves in the shoes of someone who has to make another kind of presentation about these same facts. For example, if you chose the 3 women who are being interviewed about Black art, you might choose a press release if you know how to write a press release. If you don't worry about that. You might want to say what's going on, or you might write a short news story about one of the women, because obviously you can't. We only have a half an hour. You can't write about all of them. You might pick one of them and pretend that you're the editor of her hometown paper, and you're writing a little story about about what she's doing and how things are going in her career, and etc. Okay. You might write an editorial about the article about the rural and urban hospital situation. An editorial, like a letter to the editor of a newspaper, in this case. So maybe you'd write saying, I think this is wrong, and this is why, we should give more money to this, or whatever it is that you guys decide you think. So questions about what I'm asking you to do. Good, they're all gonna be perfect,
Well,
awesome.
Yeah, so.
I can always count on you.
Well, I know, yeah, I was gonna say, so the 3 who writes the stories, kind of, we can stick to that.
You wanna keep that in your mind
Right.
when you're writing this, okay? You're not necessarily answering those questions
Okay.
per se, but let's say, for example, you're writing about any of these stories.
Okay.
You're gonna think to yourself, well, these are things you think about whenever you write a story. Who's my audience? And when I think about who my audience is, am I leaving anyone out? Who's telling the story? So if I'm telling the story about these 3 Black artists as a white woman, what do I have to be aware of to make sure that I'm telling their story and not my version of their story? So it's a different way of thinking about the stuff you think about all the time. Whenever you're writing a news story, you think about who, what, when, where, what, all of those things, right? But we all have these unconscious ideas about who our audience is and what they already know. For example, I don't think that she will mind. I think that Dr. Yoder assumed that everybody knew what a redneck was, because it's a logical assumption for a class full of Americans, not necessarily for a class that's half Chinese, because it's not a word you might have heard. I hope it's not a word you heard, because it's usually used in a derogatory context, which is why I think Taylor was uncomfortable with it, because it's usually not used in a positive way. So people tend to state people who are aware of and value diversity tend to stay away from language like that. Okay, it's not a nice thing generally to call somebody a redneck. It usually means you think less of them. And so that's probably why people are uncomfortable
It
around
demonstrates
unpacking
a
it.
power differential, right? The assumption of a power differential.
And that's what most denigrating stereotypes are about. In America, the standard power structure is white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant male. And Anglo-Saxon means they came from England, Wales, Ireland, that part of the world. That's where the first people who came here as conquerors came from. So that became the power structure. And we have to think beyond that when we're thinking. I'm guessing that in China, since the largest group is the Han Chinese, that the majority of media is written in either, right, Mandarin or Cantonese. I know there's like dozens and dozens of different dialects in China, but every newspaper doesn't come out in all of them, right? There are certain standards that you're expected to learn how to read no matter what you speak at home, correct? Yes, somebody? No, am I wrong? I'm right, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I'm right, thank you, okay, thank you. So that structure exists everywhere. Every country that you go to has a dominant culture. And then the question is, how do they treat the rest of the people? And our job is to make sure that everybody is as represented as is possible. So that's why we're doing this class. So other questions about what I'm asking you to do. You will be handing one thing in at the end of the period. If you did it all on paper and somebody's gonna go home and type it up, that's fine. You can do it however you want. I will make groups on Canvas again so that you can have a place to upload them. I will send around a piece of paper so that you can write down who's in each group, so I can put you in groups. And ideally, I'll have that done before the end of the period. If not, I'll do it afterwards, and I'll just send out an email and let you know when to submit. Please don't submit in advance, because you can't unsubmit, and it makes it harder, okay? And thank you, Rachel, for asking questions, and I know I tease you about it
No,
sometimes.
you're good.
But the truth is that I always believe that asking questions is a public service. Because if you don't know something, I guarantee there's 3 other people who don't know, but didn't want to ask. So, other questions?
I mean, I feel like I have one more question, but just when we're like, let's say if we're writing a letter to the editor or whatever, we're almost like analyzing, like could we kind of say, oh, we think this could be better if you did this, or are we doing like, if we write it, we would do who or what?
So we're not analyzing the way the story is written. Let's say, let's say you choose the rural hospital thing, which I haven't even read yet. But I'm assuming that it talks about how this is a problem, okay? Because we have less money in rural areas, and the federal government gives less money to rural areas. So if you were writing a letter to the editor, you would take the facts in that article, and you would maybe say, this is wrong because blah, blah. So you're using these texts as your source of information. You're not writing about the way they were written. You're writing something new based on these facts.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
This is a problem.
Right, so let's say you decide to write a press release for Pearl Street about how you should still keep coming to Pearl Street, and this is not the kind of behavior that we tolerate, and blah, 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 blah.
Does that reflect?
You would use the information in that article, these things happened, but this is not who Boulder is, and blah, blah, blah. So that could be a letter to the editor, that could be a press release, because that's opinion-based. Or like if you wanted to take the story about the 3 artists, you might write it as a news story, pretending that you knew where, I think it probably says where they grew up, and if it didn't, you can make something up, and say, you know, this is the Bowling Green, Kentucky Gazette, and this particular artist grew up here, and this is what she's, you know, done in her career, and, you know, kind of you don't get to say we're proud of her, because it's a news piece, but you can say the things that she's done, and you can quote her in the article, and talk about whatever facts you find in the article, you can use to create your story.
Okay,
Making sense?
okay, thanks.
And if you have questions, I'll walk around and answer them.